So, Vanya, we've been talking about families lately, and we know that the pioneering spirit of gender equality in the United States started with black women. Why did this happen?
Yeah, I'm glad we know this. We've known that for a while now, but I'm sure that a lot of people don't know about it and might even question it. Right? What do you mean? Started with black women, but then if we look at previous videos of mine when we talked about music, for example, when we go, you look at it, and a lot of initiatives in the United States started with among blacks or by blacks, and I think that has to do with their being um, oppressed, and the group with the most confrontation with whites. Not that other groups haven't been confronted, but the most extreme in a way, and because it was the group that was enslaved. So then slavery ends up um, marking their status even after it was abolished. So with emancipation, former slaves were now free citizens of the United States, and as such, they should have had the same access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as other men of other colors, but that's the all races. But that's not what happened. And so during slavery, the image, the myth, the stigma of black men as bestial, as only interested in raping white women, as unreliable, as shifty, uh, was developed, and obviously was carried into the period after slavery, because now they're free. They're going to be less hard to control. I mean, they'll be the opposite. It'll be harder to control because now they're free. So they're free to come and go. So we must contain them. And one way of containing black men was denying them jobs, uh, with the excuse that they're not reliable. And so often it happened, it fell to the women, to black women, to be able to get jobs. Not that they paid a lot of money. A lot of them worked as domestic servants, but it was steady employment as opposed to seasonal work or some sort of transitory work that the man would get. And so with that, they were able to, the families were able to rely on the women's income, the women's wages, more than on the men's wages. And so does that mean that black men in the 19th century, early 20th century were saying, oh, that's wonderful. I'm totally okay with that, with my wife or my mother, whatever, whoever it is, their woman, to take care of the family? No, but for them, that was a reality to which they had to adapt a lot earlier than men of, than white men, for example. And so with employment, and especially black women's employment, with time, there emerged a black middle class, albeit tiny, but that was composed of women who worked for pay, men who worked for pay, educated. They were more educated than the masses because after slavery was abolished, there was the 12-year period of Reconstruction in the South when blacks were allowed to go to school to get an education. There were lawyers, there were judges, there were teachers, there were professors. Historically, black colleges and universities were founded at that time. So that was the black middle class, and those women were advocating women working, women forming families, but also being in the labor force, also having careers. And that was at the end of the 19th century. Like journalists and, some were even doctors. One woman, one major figure that comes to my mind because she is one of my idols was Ida B. Wells, who was a journalist from Memphis, Tennessee, who made a career out of denouncing lynching. There were thousands of lynchings in the United States of not only Black men but Black women and children as well. Something that a lot of people don't know, but they would deny that these lynchings had taken place. So she started going to the areas because even though they denied the existence of lynchings, they would advertise the lynchings. So paradoxically, so she would go and report them and publish them. She was a journalist. So she did that until the city of Memphis told her to leave or they would do away with her, get rid of her. And she moved to the Midwest until, didn't come back until she was in her 60s, I think. But she was one of those women who were married, had children, grandchildren, and had careers. And I think her husband was a lawyer, if I remember correctly. And so that happened way before the so-called second wave of the feminist movement, which happened in the early 60s, when a very large number of women joined the labor force. But it was a very large number of white women who joined the labor force and then started demanding more gender equality. So it's like, it was even called like the stalled revolution. It's a revolution, so many women. But when they said women, they really meant white women, because non-white women had been in the labor force for a long time. And what we could say that was, less, maybe different from what the Black women had advocated in the 19th century, in the 20th century, was that, it was more, the media were more widespread in the 19th century, the 20th century. So more people heard about it, right? Like, oh, women's lib. Oh, look at that. Oh, they're burning bras. That never happened, right? It never happened. But so all of that because there was television, because we would see that on TV, women demanding more equality. We would see it in movies. We would see it in newspapers. Whereas in the 19th century, it was less well known, but the origins are there and not in the 20th century.